Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, I live in a homeowner association and my entitled neighbor is jealous of my pool. She trespasses while I am on vacation and throws an illegal party. She ends up hurting herself and then suing me for medical bills since it happened on my property. This is why you should never mess with me. Let's dive right into the story. So in my personal experience, dealing with Karens is best done by getting some kind of petty revenge on them. So this was my goal when I got into a bit of trouble with one Karen last summer. I got a pool in my backyard and it is not uncommon for me to invite people over like friends or even sometimes neighbors. I am a social person, but at the end of the day, it is my house and pool, so nobody is using it without my permission. This was going fine until one week when I went on vacation with my wife and came home to Karen suing me. And by the way, Ripe stars, my apologies if you can hear the rain in the background. There's a small monsoon going on outside here in Thailand. Anyway, I was confused, but to spare you some confusion, I'll tell you what happened while I was gone and go from there. So first of all, Karen is a member of the HOA and likes to assert her fake authority all the time to the point that nobody likes her. She likes to think that she is always right even when the things she says are wrong. Like things being against HOA rules when in fact no rule exists for it. She does not try and do anything crazy like try to fine people or take their money, it is more of an entitled sense of always needing to be right. Mix that with narcissistic behavior and you get a very annoying Karen. She decided she wanted to have a pool party, but the issue was that she did not have a pool. So she invited others from the neighborhood to a party at my pool, and from what I gathered later, everybody else was under the assumption that I gave the okay for the party. In fact, I heard nothing about it, and while it was happening, some very crazy things were going on with Karen. When I have parties on my property, I have a few rules, and one of them is I don't like any kind of drugs, even if they are legal in my state like pot. I find mixing a pool, drugs and alcohol can lead to some serious problems. So, well, Karen was both drunk and high, hanging out right by the edge of my pool. She then tripped and fell into the pool while at the same time scraping her leg badly along the edge. From what I heard, it ended the party and an ambulance had to come and things were a little tense. Karen was fuming about how unsafe the conditions were in my yard and telling everybody to stay away from the pool and that she was gonna make sure the death trap was removed. About 2 days later we got back from vacation and it didn't take long to hear the entire story from our neighbors. They were very apologetic for being on my property, but since they truly thought I knew about the whole thing, I did not blame any of them. The only person that I blamed was Karen, and one would think that after sobering up she would realize her fault. But of course she always had to be right though and decided to sue me because since she got hurt on my property she thinks I should be liable. Now again, I don't know about other places, but where I live it is true that if somebody gets hurt on your property, you are the one responsible for it. You might see a flaw in that logic for this particular case, but we will get back to that in a minute. Karen wanted to make it a loud fuss that she was suing us, and honestly, I have no idea why. Maybe she thought I would back down and just give in, or maybe she wanted to try and embarrass me. I was not gonna let myself get bullied by her though, so I went to court with the full intent to not give her a single dime. In fact, I was counter-suing her, so it was gonna be a little bit of a crazy case. I also just want to say that her injury, while not severe, was real, and if it happened when I was having a party, I would 100% be apologizing and paying medical bills. So we go to court and I couldn't believe that the thing I thought would be the hardest to prove was the easiest. My side was prepared to prove that I was on vacation and there was no evidence of us allowing for this party. Instead, she basically admitted that we had no idea she was doing this, and when the judge questioned her about why she was throwing a party on our property while we were on vacation, she had a pretty crazy answer. Karen, the pool is in the yard of an HOA home. That means it belongs to the HOA and the entire community can just use it at any time without written permission by OP. Judge, that's not how any HOA works. They own the property and going on it without their consent and knowledge is the definition of trespassing. Karen, the law says that if I get hurt on their property, they are liable. Judge, that does not extend to being on their property illegally. They have zero responsibility for your actions. I have looked over the images and inspection of the pool and it is not labeled as unsafe. Karen was really angry that the judge was telling her that she was wrong. Because guys, obviously, a Karen usually knows more than a judge. And I kept hearing her try to tell him and the lawyers that they didn't know what they were talking about. She was getting shut up by her own lawyer, who was probably trying to stop her from digging herself into a bigger hole. So she was not gonna get any money from us. Now it went on to countersuing against her. For that, she was given a misdemeanor for trespassing, which meant she was not gonna go to jail, but she was gonna have that on her record. Also, we were granted a restraining order that she had to stay away from us and the property. I started this story by telling you that I love petty revenge though, so I knew I had to get some on Karen. It was only halfway through the summer and the pool was cleaned and ready for some awesome swimming. We had more parties that summer than any other, including a huge one with all of our neighbors, all of which except Karen, who because of the restraining order was not allowed to come to any of these parties. She was left out the entire summer and did not get to swim, and for me that was pretty great revenge. Would you have done the same thing if you were in my shoes? Or would you have let the whole thing go and given Karen another chance? Let me know in the comments so I can see how many of you are just as petty as me and love getting revenge on people that wrong you. And yeah, ripe stars, I will relay this question to you. Would you have done the same SOP, or would you have even taken a step further? Let us know in the comments, and now let's continue to the next HOA story. This one is titled, HOA neighbor squatted next to my home and used the property to cook and sell meth. So my assumptions of HOAs were that they were always in uppity nice neighborhoods. There are strict rules that everyone has to follow, and if you don't follow them, then you have to pay fines and or are kicked out. Well, do I have a crazy story for you guys today. So I moved into an HOA neighborhood. I only ever had to pay a few fines myself, although they were all stupid and most of my neighbors were friendly. The HOA board members did not really bother me, but for some reason I had a real odd feeling about the HOA president. Do you know when you meet someone and you automatically don't trust them because their vibe is off? Yes, that was how I felt about the HOA president. I did not know what it was, but it turns out that my initial impression would end up being right, so here is the scoop. Months prior to this, one of the neighbors got evicted from his house. It sucks because you know this is a great neighborhood and all. The guy was months behind on rent and well, the rest is pretty self-explanatory. The house went up for rent and sale, but since the prices of these homes are pretty expensive, there's not a lot of people looking to move into them. This was apparent when the house sat vacant for months, but it was not as vacant as we thought it was. You see, the old tenant had moved back in, and despite obviously not paying rent or anything like that, I heard from another neighbor that this guy was now unemployed and selling drugs. I believe the unemployed part, but I didn't believe the selling drugs part until I saw it with my own eyes. Keep in mind that this guy was pretty sly. There was hardly ever any noise or light coming from the house, and we only knew that he was squatting there because another neighbor saw him at 4 AM in the morning. And well, soon it became apparent that he was actually really selling drugs. In the late hours of the night into the wee hours of the morning, people were coming in and out of that house. It made me feel extremely uncomfortable, and soon enough all of the neighbors began talking about it. We decided that we wanted to have a meeting with the HOA president and discuss what could be done to take care of the situation. I don't ever remember this guy being a bad neighbor, but it was clear now that he was doing illegal things to supplement his income, and all of these strange people were coming into our neighborhood. We did not feel safe. So we scheduled a meeting with the HOA president and my mind was blown. This HOA president knew this guy pretty well, like they were on a friendly basis. And he was aware that he was living in the house rent-free. He claimed that he was a good guy and that there was no way he was dealing drugs. He said that he is just down on his luck right now and needs somewhere to stay until he gets enough cash to get another apartment or house. What? If he obviously is not employed, then where does he think the money is going to come from? Many neighbors were furious and said that this was only going to enable the tenant to push his luck even more. And they were right. Shortly after this board meeting, we noticed that packages and mail had been going missing. My wife worked from home, so the convenience of ordering online and having it delivered to our doorstep was important for us. And well, we had Ring cameras installed on our house after the board meeting. Due to safety concerns obviously, and wouldn't you know it, we caught the tenant on our Ring camera stealing 2 Amazon packages off our porch. Honestly, I was furious. Now, at this point in the story, you are wondering why we haven't called the police so far. To be quite frank, the police department of our city sucks, so there is that. However, one of our neighbors had been preparing evidence in order to turn into the police. She had video evidence, pictures, etc. that could cause an investigation if she turned it into the police. And well, that is what she did. And what we found out was that is even more shocking than the guy squatting in the house. Our kind neighbor filed a police report for suspicious activity, and thankfully the police were able to launch an investigation into what was going on at the house. And guess what they found? And that yes, the guy was indeed selling drugs, but was not just selling drugs, he was cooking them himself too. Inside the house, in our neighborhood. And not only that, but the HOA president was also in on it. What? I knew from the beginning that the HOA president was not a good guy, but damn, this just blew my mind. These two ended up getting arrested and the neighbor that collected evidence ended up getting voted in as the new HOA president. Obviously, the guy could not be an HOA president from jail. Anyways, this was one of the wildest things I've ever experienced. Honestly, I never expected this from an HOA community. I am biased, but come on. Can't nobody just behave? And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, I have to agree with OP here. When I think of HOA neighborhoods, I don't really think of people selling and cooking drugs. Usually I would think these are kind of like upper, higher end neighborhoods, where people probably have more money and don't need to sell drugs. But then again, HOAs are just always surprising us. It is pretty much the gift that keeps on giving. If you enjoy HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment just to support me. Thank you so much in advance, your support is very much appreciated. And the next one is titled, My Neighbor is a Total Liar. This story takes place a few years ago and still makes me laugh. I'm a math teacher at a really high class only ladies school. There we have a dress code, very formal, which is strange since we are in a beach city on a tropical county. Our principal, also the owner, wants to implement the model that he saw at a school in London, and luckily he put ACs in all the rooms so we don't die. The worst thing about the school is definitely Karen. I don't have to work with her as much as other teachers, but when I have to, she is a real pain in the butt. She is entitled, stubborn, and it's impossible to have a normal conversation with her. Also, she always makes the simplest things way more complicated, and I suspect that she earns something on the side with that. I never said anything because, unlike my wife, I'm a really non-confrontational person and I'm also afraid of her position with the owner. December comes and the owner invites all of the employees to a party at his mansion. It was a pool party in the middle of summer. Needless to say that no one was gonna dress formally. I arrived to the party with my wife and we proceeded to greet everyone. As expected, no formal clothes in sight. I introduced my wife to a few people who did not know her, and everything was nice until Karen arrives. Karen arrives with her daughter Lucy, who was our best student that year. The same year that she graduated, she was going to a very prestigious medicine college. Every single one of us was proud of her, and Karen made sure that the world knew how big of a genius her daughter was. Lucy was dressed in a cute sundress and bring a bag with, I assumed was her swimsuit, but Karen on the other hand was wearing something really inappropriate. A very fancy beige dress with shining jewelry and a lot of makeup. She first looked at us with a look that says, "The star of the show is here," but quickly faded out as she noticed that everyone was dressed casually. In this moment, my wife was near the pool talking to a colleague of mine, and I was in the grill with the owner. They, Karen and Lucy, greeted everyone and part ways as most of the ladies were gonna wear their swimsuits inside the house. A few men decided to take their shirts off and jump in the pool while others didn't. Me, owner, and another friend kept working on the grill. Karen proceeds to walk to us. I forgot to mention that she is the owner's niece and works at the school looking for and getting excursions and field trips. So the conversation starts. Karen, "Well, looks like I'm the only one with some sense here." Owner, "I told you it was a pool party." "Well, I thought it was one of your parties, it was expected from us." Looking at me and friend, "To have some class." Owner, "Let's see how long you endure this weather in your dress." Karen stomps off to the restroom. A few minutes later, the ladies came back all looking incredible, especially my wife in her black bikini showing off all her tattoos. She drew a little attention and she loved it. Wife and Lucy were chatting in the poolside while others ate the food or played in the pool. When Karen came back, she was livid and I was the lucky one to be close enough to have to listen to her. She complains about everyone's swimsuits, how depraved they are, and how childish it is to play in a pool. She only stops when she sees my wife talking to Lucy. Karen, "Oh my god, who is that woman?" Me, "Oh, she's with me." She's with you? How dare you drag that woman to Mr. Owner's party? Well, that's because she's my— Stop! I don't know why you brought your side chick here, but I'm telling your wife and Mr. Owner about this now. She stomps to the poolside and grabs Lucy's arm. Karen, get away from this woman. She's no good for you. Lucy, Mom, what the hell? Karen, you should be ashamed of yourself being a married man's mistress wife. Wife? What? Karen, we all know that OP is cheating on his wife with you. Aggressively pointing at my wife. Until this moment, everyone was shocked with Karen's actions, but now some, like me, were in pure disbelief and others were chuckling and others were trying to hide out of cringe. But my wife is not like anyone else. She starts out loud, laughing and looking at me, and she says, "Hey babe, it must be hard. I don't give you space, not even when you cheat on me." Everyone starts laughing, including Lucy and Owner. Karen was completely confused. I walk to my wife as she asks, and we show Karen our rings matching with our initials. Wife, Karen, we are happily married and completed 5 years in last September. For the rest of the party, Karen was in the corner looking like a grumpy child who was grounded by her parents. The reason why I think Karen misunderstood things is because I always wear suits, so she thought that my wife must be some boring, respectable lady like her, and my wife showing her tattoos thinks that morons like Karen think diminish your value as a person. I do have some tattoos, but I always wear my suit and was not shirtless at that time, so of course she did not see it. The reason why my wife and Lucy were so close is because my wife is a tattoo artist and has her own studio, where Lucy got her first tattoo and piercing. Years later, Karen was fired and replaced with someone much cheaper and a lot more pleasant to work with. Did not hear of her since. Edit number 1, Karen knew about Lucy's tattoo and piercing, but they are more feminine. The tattoo is a flower on her shoulder and the piercing is in her navel with a beautiful jewelry. And the next one is titled An Old Water Tower. So this actually happened to my dad a few years ago. He lived in an area right along the Texas/Oklahoma border in a fairly rural area. My dad primarily worked in pipeline construction. One day, my dad noticed someone had purchased a very large property not too far down the road. Turns out that the new neighbor was actually from the suburbs around Columbus, Ohio, and had just won a lottery prize. The man had not won the jackpot, but had won a smaller prize around $2 million. Well, ripe stars, I guess that's a matter of perspective. In Thailand, that would be the jackpot times 3. Anyway, my dad was also originally from Ohio, so he decided to say hello. A few days later he meets the lotto neighbor, we will call him Jim. Jim starts telling my dad about his dream to build his own self-sustaining homestead far away from the rest of society. Jim was very interested in prepping and convinced of a soon-to-come global societal collapse. He used his lotto winnings to purchase the land and began building his homestead. My dad honestly didn't find this that odd because many people in the area had some tendency towards independence and those prepping shows were popular at the time. About a year later, Jim reached out to my dad to ask for help with a construction project that involved burying a large water tower in the ground. My dad was a little confused but decided to go take a look. Turns out Jim bought an old water tower about 15 feet in diameter and about 15 feet high, for the purpose of reusing it as an underground shelter. Jim had recently completed the build of a prefab home on his property and wanted the water tower buried partially under the new home with a trapdoor built in a closet to access it. My dad immediately thought this was the dumbest thing he had ever heard and proceeded to tell Jim all the potential issues with his plan. Jim cut him off and told my dad that his contractor for the home had basically told him the same, and so had several others he had contracted to try to get them to bury this water tower. However, Jim believed this was simply laziness on their part and had the utmost confidence in his plan. My dad left, but a day or so later Jim contacts him again and asks about paying my dad to let him rent some construction equipment he had on his own property. My dad again goes over with him what a bad idea this is and how no legitimate crew would ever do this for him. Jim brings up using my dad's equipment and illegal laborers. My dad decides, well, if he is determined, might as well make a few bucks off lotto winner Jim. He quotes him some ridiculous price to rent his equipment and says he can ask a guy at work he knows about gathering up a group of Mexican day laborers. Jim agrees to the crazy price and my dad gets in touch with a Mexican friend who had a crew of day laborers. A bit later, my dad asks his friend about how the project is going. He tells my dad how nasty Jim treated the workers, how stupid the whole plan is, and how his specifications for how he wanted this built were completely idiotic. Whenever they would offer up suggestions or point out why something he wanted was wrong, he would essentially shut them down and use a bunch of slurs for Mexicans. So they buried the water tower and built this secret entrance exactly as he wanted, knowing it was completely stupid. He mentioned they only completed the job because Jim was paying them way more than they were used to making. Everyone agreed Jim was a jerk, but all the more reason to gouge your prices and take his money. A year or so goes by when my dad gets a frantic call from Jim. It had rained quite a bit, which was unusual for the area, and now the entire ground floor area of the back of his home was bowed upwards about 2 feet. My dad goes to Jim's and takes a look around, realizing what has happened. Given that they had essentially just buried a large hollow object underneath his home, the rain caused the water tower to be pushed upwards and right through his first floor. My dad explained the situation and Jim immediately lost it, started ranting about how he should have never used those Mexican laborers and how he was gonna make them come fix it. My dad mentioned how that was probably impossible since most of them go back and forth across the border, but Jim was livid. My dad later found out from Jim that his insurance would not cover the damages to his home because he had buried a water tower under it without telling anyone. He mentioned trying to sue the insurance company, but that went nowhere. He also tried numerous times to find the day laborers, but was told you get what you get when you hire illegal workers to do a project that would never have gotten a permit. Over the months afterwards, there was a lot of fallout for Jim and he couldn't even live in his home due to the damage. It eventually was torn down to be able to remove the water tower from beneath it. He burned through his lotto winnings pretty fast, so he didn't have anything left to rebuild it. He ended up selling the land and moving away about a year later. It took 12 years, but I got my revenge today. Backstory: 17 years ago my ex and I purchased my uncle's house. It was in a good neighborhood, well maintained and not too expensive. Our only complaint was our creepy neighbor we will call Jimbo. Jimbo hated my kids for some reason, even though they were small and we were rarely home. Years ago my uncle planted anise bushes about 3 feet from the fence line around the backyard as a noise barrier and for pool privacy. I was meticulous in making sure the bushes were properly manicured and didn't encroach on the neighbor's property. I kept them fairly tall, but below the roofline. These bushes had been a source of contention between my uncle and Jimbo for years and carried on after we moved in. This is important. Fast forward 2 years, my ex and I split, leaving me pregnant with 4 and facing what was going to be losing a child alone. This was much to Jimbo's delight. He seemed to take some twisted pleasure in my family's pain. He made sure my kids and I heard his snarky comments about my deceased child often. I couldn't afford to move and I was not willing to uproot my family because a gross old man was determined to show the world how much of a butthole he could be. He also continued to harass me about those bushes, but I soldiered on. I came home from work one afternoon to find my anise bushes destroyed on Jimbo's side and all the way across the back. They had been cut from about 8 feet down to about 3.5 foot, limbless stumps. Most of them were completely destroyed. It was very cold that day, causing many of them to shock and die. The rear neighbor said that Jimbo accessed our backyard and chopped them all down before she was able to stop him. The police issued a trespass citation from my property, but said the bushes were a civil matter. So I took Jimbo to court to replace the bushes that were close to their former glory, would have totaled about 8K. Lawyer fees, court costs, etc. came to around $12,000, but old Jimbo refused to pay, so I put a lien on his house. I have since remarried and moved to a different town. I put my house up for sale, but the market was crap, so it was listed for more than 6 months before I got a bite. I really didn't want to sell to an investor because I loved my neighbors, except for you know who, but desperation took hold and my house became a Section 8 rental. And a very busy one at that. The other neighbors moved away, leaving Jimbo and his misery to deal with the slumlord and his nutty tenants. I got a call 2 weeks ago from a lawyer working for a title company asking me to accept an offer to clear the lien on Jimbo's house so he can sell it and move away from the drug-infested neighborhood. I contacted my attorney and found out that the lien had been refiled a couple of years ago to keep it active, and with interest and penalties, Jimbo owed me over $16,000. I decided that I was not going to settle for the $1,800 they offered and that he could pay what he owed or deal with it. He threatened to sue me, but we all know how that was going to go. So today I picked up a check for $16,754 and signed a lien satisfaction document. It took a little more than 12 years, but the revenge on the evil Jimbo has been exacted and it feels so good. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and if you did, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and maybe leave a comment as well as like the video if you enjoy my content. Thank you so much in advance, and I will see you again tomorrow.